Oh, come on, man.
I don't like him. I don't like that offense.
Oh, 100%.
I like Kirk Cousins. I'll fight everyone on this.
He's one of these guys that I'm a big believer in.
Who would we have ranked higher right now?
Are you serious? You don't actually believe that. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Dan Harris, your host for the day. With me is the mediocre Mike Tagliere. I don't know. Tags Yates has been calling you the great and then the terrible.
Terrible, yeah.
To me, you're mediocre. Anyway, you can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, how are you today?
I'm awesome, man.
Are you mediocre? Are you mediocre?
I'm so happy
today?
to have you back. Like, all you do is jab me, and it's funny. I mean, like, how can you get mad about a jab coming from Woody? I mean,
yes,
you just can't get mad about it.
I hope everybody understands. Tags calls me Woody because Tags and I only actually met face-to-face in person on our team trip in January, and turns out I'm like kind of tall, super skinny, and when I do interviews, my arms flail around like I've got these.
I mean, seriously, if you want to picture Dan right now, and if you haven't seen our YouTube channel, just imagine Woody from Toy Story, and you got it.
Yeah, correct. And there will be, I'm sure, a Halloween episode or something where I'll dress up like Woody for the full effect. Yes. But anyway, today we're going to talk about 15 players who we expect to rise up our draft boards as the draft season goes along. And to do that is one of the most accurate rankers in fantasy football. That is Sean Koerner of the Action Network. You can find him on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker. Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're each going to be going through 5 players that are going to rise on our draft board, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that right before we started recording, FantasyPros published its draft accuracy rankings, and you, Sean, good sir, as you now know, finished as the most accurate fantasy football draft ranker of 2019. Congratulations. How do you feel?
Thank you. Amazing. This is the first time I've won it. I came close, and I think it was like 2015-16. But this is my first win, and it's a bit different than the weekly contest. We kind of know where we stand on that, and we can kind of track it. This one was just kind of out of the blue. So it's a surreal feeling. Like I said on Twitter, I'm going to spend 80% of this weekend celebrating, and probably the other 20% trying to figure out who the hell's going to get targets for the Raiders this year. So it's fun to win the weekly one because the season's over pretty much, and I can party it up. But now it's like I'm still in work mode, so I'm gonna celebrate cautiously.
Well, I'm really happy for you. You've just been in just this horrible drought. You hadn't finished in the top 4 in draft accuracy in over a year. I'm really, it's tough. And Tags, we were talking about how incredibly impossible draft accuracy rankings are. So, Sean, your level of consistency.
Yeah, and I want to just give Dan some credit here, too. I mean, Dan finished number 16 overall, guys. Like, Dan is kind of a big deal as well. Both of these guys have apparently read the same book on projections that I need to get into because, I'm different from Sean in that way, where Sean is like, he's the projections wizard. And, he's a guy that spends a lot of time in his model and figuring that out. So I need to go and read this book first off. I've always been – so, Sean, how do you do this? I want to ask you real quick before we get into the show is that, I do my projections, and I see obviously players move a lot from where I rank them pre-projections, and then I move players around a little bit. I'm trying to move them less and less. Do you just stick with your projections in your rankings, or do you have some players that you're going to move based on how you feel about them?
Yeah, I think the latter for sure. I think one of the things that I'm definitely not is stubborn about my projections. I'm more than willing to move them, even in extreme directions, if I find something that lends to that, or if I try to not have too many opinions. But if there's a reason, I definitely go against my model. I would say, half of it is creating, a good model, knowing which data is predictive and whatnot, but also understanding the game. So I think it's finding that balance between the two is probably what I do the best. But it's one of those things where you can trust your gut at times, especially you guys. I know you guys are sharp as hell, so I would be willing to trust your gut more and just use the data to kind of guide that a bit. But it's kind of finding that balance. And again, that book that Dan and I tout kind of describes that balance.
Yeah. And that book, by the way, is Super Forecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction. Now, the reason why Sean and I know that we read the same book is because Sean appeared on our new podcast called Game Changers. It is a podcast where we talk to some of your favorite analysts in the sports and fantasy sports industry and just get to know more about their journey and how they got to be where they are. We've got an episode coming out today, actually, where I talked to Joe Dolan, who's also one of the most accurate draft rankers over the last several years. To find it, just search for Game Changers on wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can find it at fantasypros.com/podcast. If you do listen, leave us a review. Reviews are a really easy way that you can support a podcast, especially new ones, and help get them off the ground. And that's also why you should leave a review for this podcast, which will also allow you to be entered into our contest where you can win a signed DeAndre Hopkins helmet, courtesy of our good friends over at pristineauction.com. You can go to fantasypros.com/contest for more details, but all you need to do to enter is write a review for the show on either Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Send a screenshot of that review to contest@fantasypros.com. The deadline to enter is July 15th at 11:59 p.m., so you have just a few more days, so make sure to get that in.
Hey, Dan, before we get into the meat of the show,
Sure.
I know you and I talked about it for just a quick second, and you're like, let's talk about it in the podcast. So I wanted to bring up, Sean knows nothing about this, but I wanted to bring up a scenario because people have asked me about it, and it's something that I think we have to consider. The NFL season, obviously we know COVID's affected a whole lot. Now, let's pretend for a moment that the NFL season ends abruptly. Let's say it's week 6, and they decide they don't have enough players to get on the field, and they just say, we're going to shut it down, and basically there's no playoffs or anything like that. Now, Sean, how do you think the NFL would handle this in the NFL draft? Or even if, let's pretend there's no season at all. We don't want to think that, but, if there's no season at all, how do they handle the NFL draft? Is it a straight up lottery? They can't do a weighted lottery because then you're rewarding teams that were bad for 2 straight years. And then the same thing goes for dynasty owners. If you have dynasty rookie picks the following year, how do you guys think that situation plays out?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't even thought of that. There's a million things that I've thought about, with the pandemic and how it's going to impact the NFL. I haven't even thought about that yet, so I'm not sure. But, one thing I am monitoring is what if the college football season's canceled? What happens with those players that, likely would have been in this year's draft? Are they going to go in a supplemental draft? Like, that's something that could impact this year even. But there's so many unknowns that I don't even try to guess with those things. So that's something I'd just be curious to see how they. And I'm not one to kind of predict what the NFL's ever going to do. So I'd be curious to see how they'd handle that as well.
Well, I don't work for the NFL, obviously, but I can say that my personal proposal would be to give the Jets the first 3 picks in the draft. I mean, we need it. We need some help. And I'd like to be able to convince my son to jump from the Pats to the Jets.
Especially in a draft with some of the biggest name quarterbacks, like, Trevor Lawrence.
We're fine.
There's been teams that have been accumulating picks. You're not going to, you're going to take him over Sam Darnold, right?
Stop. Okay, I'm not getting into this right now. But what I do want to get into is the fact that Raheem Mostert's agent tweeted out a couple days ago that he essentially is requesting a trade. Now, I don't know necessarily whether that's actually going to happen. Obviously, Mostert is currently the 26th running back going in half PPR ADP. He's a 6th-round pick. Tevin Coleman, 43rd running back, a 10th round pick. Jerick McKinnon, 81st running back, the 292nd pick. So, Sean, how, if at all, is Mostert's agent's tweet impacting your thoughts on the San Francisco running back situation?
Well, it's complicated because I'm a big believer in just investing in the cheapest 49ers running back. So I was fading Mostert pretty much in all my drafts anyway. So this news doesn't really help my strategy out. And then towards the end of the draft, I would, like in a best ball league, I would take a flyer on a McKinnon or even a JaMychal Hasty. But now those guys are just going to have to move up everyone's draft board, including Coleman. There's a chance that they meet the demand. He's asking for just like about $1 million more or something. So it's something that could resolve itself. But in this offense, in this running back scheme, really any of these guys can erupt the same way Mostert did last year. And unfortunately, last year the cheapest running back I was targeting on the Niners was Matt Breida, and it wasn't guys like Mostert or even Jeff Wilson. So this offense is really tricky to gauge. But in general, I like to invest in these later round 49er running backs anyway.
How about you, Tag? Same thing or what?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just going to sit back and wait. I don't want to overreact to it because players will demand trains all the time, and then they'll figure out some way to make it work. I think Mostert's just frustrated not having a guaranteed role on the team more than anything. So it's like getting out of there might give him more opportunity because he's not young. I mean, Mostert, what is he, 28 years old?
Yeah, I think he's turning 28.
Yeah, that's not an ideal age for a running back, especially when running backs that are 26 some of them aren't getting like second contracts, and if they are, it's like a 1-year deal and they're kind of moving on. So I don't blame him for doing this, but it's just something to monitor. It's in the background right now, but I don't know if they have another running back on the roster that I would say is someone that you have to like draft right now. Like Tevin Coleman's not a guy that's going to carry a workload.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I was on the clock on the Scott Fishbowl, and the one time I wasn't on my computer, I was driving to pick my kids up from camp, and the news broke, and then I was like, well, I'll take my shot then there on Tevin Coleman, but I'm not all that excited about it. Anyway, let's get into the meat of the show. Like I said, we're going to be going through 15 players that we expect to rise up fantasy managers' draft boards as the draft season goes on, 5 each. Sean, why don't you get us started? Who's your number one?
So I'm going to start at quarterback, and the guy for me is Tyrod Taylor. My projections have him around QB 31, which is right in line with the ADP. But I think, in terms of things that the COVID pandemic will kind of influence is it's going to favor these veterans, especially early in the season. But it could be the case for the entire year where, the Chargers are a team that are built to win now. We know that. So they are more likely to stick with a guy like Tyrod Taylor as long as possible. Because, a rookie QB, especially like Justin Herbert, probably needs more time to develop and get used to the NFL. And I'm anticipating at most one preseason game, very limited training camps. It's just not an offseason that's conducive for a guy like Herbert. And, Anthony Lynn had Tyrod Taylor in his system over in Buffalo, so he's just more familiar with him. I think he's going to stick with him. And right now I'm projecting Tyrod for 11 games. But that's probably going to keep creeping up as we get closer to the season, where I can see Tyrod being a legit, low-end QB2, so just passing up guys like Sam Darnold and Derek Carr. He might not have the legs at his age, but he's still a dual-threat QB and has a ton of weapons there. I think people in general will start gravitating towards guys like him the closer we get to draft season.
So out of curiosity, just, I won't hold you to it. Obviously, it would be a lot of factors, but ballparking it right now, if you said guarantee Tyrod Taylor is going to start 16 game for the Chargers, where do you think you'd have him ranked?
Oh, he would be. If he's guaranteed to start 16 games, that would be the highest projection for all QBs, because I typically dock, a half game or a full game. But he would be, if he played all 16 games, he'd be a mid-range QB2 to high end. Again, it really depends on his legs and if his ability to run, but I think with these weapons, I think he would be pretty good in this scheme. And they might do some things to kind of mirror the Ravens offense. I know they might run out of pistol a lot, so it's one of those things where the situation might be a lot better than people realize. So I could see drafting him as a high upside, low end QB2.
Tags, what do you think about Tyrod Taylor moving up draft boards?
I think you could say a lot of similar things about Ryan Fitzpatrick, a guy that, Tua Tagovailoa, he's someone that's coming off a major injury, and, with limited training camps and maybe no preseason, whatever the case is, we're going to see a lot of rookies kind of be shelved, especially quarterbacks. So I agree with Sean on this one. Tyrod Taylor, obviously the mobility is there. He's going to be 31 years old at the start of the season, so he is creeping up there in age, same age as Cam Newton, but the mobility that he has, he's going to have to use it, because that Chargers offensive line, they don't really have a left tackle that's proven to do anything. I think Trey Pipkins is who I think they're anticipating on starting at the left tackle. So this team is going to lose a whole lot of pass attempts. Austin Eckler coming out of the backfield as a receiving option. The teams have to account for him. So I'm with Sean on this one. I think that he would be an excellent streamer. Like if you wanted to platoon him with someone else, you could look at the matchups. I think they're playing against the Bengals in week 1. That would be a week where you can consider streaming someone like Tyrod Taylor. So yeah, I'm with Sean on this one, and that he is going to be moving up draft boards.
Yeah, Bobby, I feel like has been hammering the early season schedule for Tyrod Taylor as somebody to draft. Sorry, Sean, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I try to think of all factors, and one other one that might be silly, but one of the things I think will happen is we won't have fans. I really believe that. And so, Tyrod had that incident in Cleveland where, fans were cheering for Baker to come in. There won't be that aspect with these rookie QBs. We won't have fans cheering for the first round draft pick to come in the game. So I think in a weird way that kind of does lend these veterans a little bit more job security in kind of a weird way.
Plus, the Chargers are probably going to be great because they're completely comfortable with playing with nobody in the stands, right? They're ready to go already with that. All right, that's great. Tags, let's go to your first guy.
All right, I want to bring up Tarik Cohen. We've talked about him before on the podcast. I really have no idea how he's the 46th running back off the board right now. I mean, even in a year last year where he didn't have any explosive plays, if you go back to 2018, the reason he was able to finish as a top 15 running back in fantasy football, I mean, he was top 12 in PPR formats. If you go back to that year, it's because he was breaking a lot of those big plays in Matt Nagy's offense. There was a lot of unknowns for opposing defenses. And then you move to 2019 and you see everything just cut off. I mean, Tarik Cohen he actually got a little bit more volume, more targets in the passing game. He's going to get over 95, 100 targets in the passing game, which has a really high expected fantasy outcome. It may not be Austin Eckler levels because Tarik Cohen is a guy that's not going to get more than maybe 6 to 8 carries per game, but his work in the passing game is a very safe option. And I really can't say that the Bears offense takes a step back in 2020. If anything, it's going to take a step forward. I think they're somewhere in the middle with Matt Nagy in terms of the play caller he was in 2018 and then 2019. Because a lot of the struggles were placed on Mitch Trubisky and saying that he was the problem. I don't think that he was the only problem. I think there's a lot of reasons for struggles in this team, but we do know that Tarik Cohen is extremely explosive. He can break those big plays. They're going to come more often in 2020, and getting him outside the top 45 running backs. If you're going with a zero running back approach and wind up with Tarik Cohen as like your RB2, RB3 flex player, I am stoked about that.
How do you feel about that, Sean?
Yeah, I love it. He has a pretty high floor. He already has, the pass catching back role in this offense, but there's really no depth there. So if Dave Montgomery struggles or gets hurt, all they have is Ryan Null there. They might have to bring in a veteran, but Tarik Cohen, he can't handle a big workload, but he has, the upside to be more of a 10 to 15 touch guy in the event Montgomery struggles or gets hurt, just due to the lack of depth. So I love Cohen as sort of a high floor and a sneaky upside play.
Yeah, I hate to be all in agreement here, but I completely agree. I have him, in the low 30s, I believe, in half PPR formats because, he's got a great floor. I'm going to be talking about somebody else who's kind of similar a little bit later, but because, Tags, you brought up the Bears, I'm going to bring up a Bear, and that is Anthony Miller. He's the wide receiver 55 in ADP in half PPR leagues. I have him ranked 43rd. Tags, I was just looking at the Scott Fishbowl. I drafted him at wide receiver 56. You got him at 57th. Justin Boone got him at 58th. I'm not sure the ADP is ever going to get to 43 where I have him ranked, but I do think it's going to start rising. He was a slow starter last year. He had the offseason shoulder surgery, but if you look to weeks 5 through 16 when he was clearly a little healthier, he was the wide receiver 41 in half PPR formats. And you look at the final 6 games, you throw out week 17 where he got injured, 34 catches, 433 yards. That's a 90 catch, 1,154 yard pace. He scored only 2 touchdowns last year, but he had 7 as a rookie, so I think you're going to see some natural regression there. And again, I agree with you, Tags, that I do think that the Bears offense is going to get better. There are some concerns. He's again coming off shoulder surgery, so that is something. Half of his targets, roughly, I mean, that's overstating it, but came in 3 games, and you've got the uncertain QB situation, of course. Taylor Gabriel, though, is gone. I think it's going to be Nick Foles, personally, to be the QB there. He likes targeting his slot wide receivers. That's where Miller plays. Even if it's Trubisky, again, with the natural touchdown regression, I just think so long as he's healthy, and that's why I think he's going to be a riser, because I think as long as his health comes out and everything sounds okay from what I can read now, that he's going to rise up draft boards. So what do you think about that, Sean?
Yeah, I love it. I've been getting him pretty late in most of my drafts. He's a great, again, high floor player with a sneaky ceiling. You mentioned pretty much every reason I love him, but there was also an ankle injury he was dealing with at the early part of last season. Yep. So it wasn't until like after their week 5 or 6 bye that he really got going. And like you said, I mean, he's the legit number 2 weapon in this offense, maybe just ahead of Tarik Cohen. And they brought in Jimmy Graham, who I don't think is going to steal many targets from him, and Ted Ginn to kind of replace the Taylor Gabriel role. But, it's wide open for Miller this year. And like you mentioned, he's due for some positive touchdown regression as well. So I'm projected around 4 or 5 touchdowns. Nice little bonus from last year where he was, sort of a target monster. So I love him in PPR, especially, outside of the top 15 ADP. It seems ridiculous right now.
Yeah. All right, Sean, who's number 2?
So number 2 is Ronald Jones for me. He's been slowly moving up in my projections. Just the more I project this Buccaneers offense, I think it's one of those situations where, the past couple seasons, I would avoid Buccaneers running backs like the plague. I wanted nothing to do with them. But this offense is going to be completely different with Tom Brady. There's going to be fewer turnovers. The defense is going to continue to improve. So there's going to be way more run-friendly game scripts. So, I know it's going to be a battle between Ronald Jones and rookie Keyshawn Vaughn, but I think this offense can actually sustain 2 running backs the way it's built. So I think the closer we get to the season, we might see Ronald Jones start to be the favorite to be the starting running back. So where he's being drafted right now is sort of this mediocre high upside backup running back tier, and I think he's going to slowly move up to like RB 26 range. I'm thinking, guys like Cam Akers, that range, he'll be considered. Once we get more reports and there's more practice, I think we're going to get more clarity that Ronald Jones will start the season as the guy, because he's been in the system for a couple years now, and I think continuity is going to be a huge factor when it comes to this offseason specifically. So he's a guy that's been moving up my board slowly but surely.
Tags, you've talked about Ronald Jones. You're a buyer, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I was actually going to say, I've talked about Ronald Jones quite a bit. Dan, I'm curious to hear your take.
No, I completely agree. I think the big thing for this is I really think that there's going to be a really big impact on rookies. I get that, not all of them, and we'll talk about some other rookies today, but I think just the lack of preseason games, the lack of a normal offseason program, running backs is probably a little easier than the other positions, but I think all sort of continuity and in the system and everything like that is something that's going to make a big difference. So I agree. Right now, I don't have Jones particularly higher. I think I might have him 32nd. I think he's ADP 35, so I am higher than general ADP, but I can see him definitely being someone who rises a lot as draft season keeps going. All right, Tags, number 2.
Why is Jonathan Taylor going outside the top 20 running backs?
Are you really turning that over to us?
I'm curious. I mean, we had Marlon Mack last year, because people scoff at the fact when I say he's going to get 240 carries, he's going to be over 1,000 yards, maybe even 1,200 yards. Reminds me so much of Nick Chubb, and I know people haven't seen him, but running backs are not guys that take time to develop. We've seen guys like Adrian Peterson walk from one offense, move over to Arizona, and score 2 touchdowns, rush for 150 yards in his first game there. You follow your blockers, you run. It's not hard, and Jonathan Taylor's been on the team obviously since the draft, so he has the playbook. You don't draft someone like Jonathan Taylor in the second round if you're not going to use him. The rookie, everybody knows that running backs are used and abused or thrown away in the league. You don't draft Jonathan Taylor, a guy who had a heavy workload at Wisconsin, a guy that some people view as a one-contract player because he's a guy that has so many miles on his body. You don't sign him, grab him in the second round and not play him. Marlon Mack last year missed 2 games, still wound up with 247 carries behind that stout Indianapolis offensive line. So, I mean, Marlon Mack hasn't been able to stay healthy. I don't think he's I'm not saying Marlon Mack's bad. I think he's a decent running back. But again, the Colts don't draft Jonathan Taylor if they don't plan on making him the guy. So Jonathan Taylor is a guy that at RB22, his price has got to come up.
Interesting. I'll be honest. I have him at 22. I'm a little worried because I don't necessarily know how this backfield is going to break down. I mean, I don't dislike him or anything like that, but I feel like he's not been a guy that I've been fully in on. Like, this guy's going to really be a difference maker. Let me target him here. What about you, Sean? What are you thinking about him?
Yeah, he is very tricky because I agree with Tags. The upside's there. The Colts also have by far the easiest schedule in the NFL, so I think that helps him out. Agreed that the shortened offseason really doesn't impact him as much because running back, they're pretty close to their prime right when they start. He should be able to pick up the offense. I'm not worried about that. The main problem I have is in every draft I'm in, it seems like someone else takes him earlier than I would. So that's a problem. So I don't, if you want to take him over guys like Le'Veon Bell or David Johnson, I totally get it.
Yes.
The upside's there. So if you want to go for the upside, especially at that part in the draft, there's no problem with it. It's just I'm having the problem with even Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I love both rookie running backs. It's just like there's always one person in the draft that takes him way above the ADP. So it's hard for me to get many shares of him, but I can get behind it for sure.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem, just to be clear, with him.
Oh, you have a problem, man.
I have a lot of problems, but I don't have any problem with necessarily, when I feel like when you're in that 18 to 22 type range, I'm certainly fine mixing and matching. For me, my 17th guy is where I draw the line a little bit, and that's the guy I'm going to talk about now. He's RB21 in ADP for me, in half PPR. For me, he's 17, and that is James Conner. It is pretty healthy here. They're pretty obvious here. If he's healthy, and if Roethlisberger is healthy, he is going to smash an ADP of the 21st running back off the board. But I don't even think he needs Roethlisberger necessarily to be healthy through week 7 last year. So Roethlisberger was out, right? He barely played. Before his season was derailed by injury, he was on pace for more than 1,400 total yards and 14 touchdowns. They have a pretty soft run defense schedule. So really one big question mark, his health, maybe two, Roethlisberger's health. But Tags, we were just talking about the guys in that range. There are question marks around Chris Carson and Todd Gurley and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of what, how much work he's going to get. All those guys are going before him. I want to tattoo on my forehead, all your running backs have question marks, because that really is what it is when you get into that range. And look, Tomlin came out last week or whenever that said Connor is going to be the workhorse guy so long as he's healthy. You've got obviously the questions about Roethlisberger's elbow. Maybe he doesn't push it quite as much down the field. Maybe he dumps off. And really with Connor, so long as he's healthy, he's just got an enormously high floor for two reasons. One is that he's got a 16-game pace of 62 catches the last 2 years. So in half PPR, he's going to be buoyed by that. The second one is that 23 games the last 2 years, 20 touchdowns. I mean, if he's healthy, it's hard for me to see him going outside of the RB1 range.
I love the James Conner call. I've been moving him up my draft board, honestly, the past couple weeks, because he's a guy that you're worried about injuries, sure, because he hasn't been able to kind of hold up to that workload that they wanted him to. But when you hear Mike Tomlin say that, you have to take it to heart. And to be clear out there was a lot of people that liked Anthony McFarland. Tomlin, when discussing the handcuff to James Conner, it was not Anthony McFarland. It was actually Benny Snell is the guy that's going to be the backup. And I actually envision this team moving on from Jalen Samuels because of how inefficient he was last year. He just wasn't very impressive. And I think Anthony McFarland is going to be that guy that's going to be involved in the offense, maybe get 6 to 8 touches per week. But we know that James Conner is a proven stud in this offense. And if you were to tell me that he was going to play the entire season, 14, 15 games, I would be ranking him upward. I'd probably have him as number 9 or number 10 running back.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why he's going to rise is so long as he looks healthy getting into the season and stuff like that. I think that fantasy managers who are drafting are going to be looking at it and be like, yeah, this is a guy who, when push comes to shove, I want to take it. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I love it. And I agree that, people might see Jalen Samuels, Benny Snell, and Anthony McFarland and think, it's going to be some committee. But the more Mike Tomlin talks, the more people are going to realize he does prefer to have workhorse backs. And we know James Conner can be that guy. And, with Big Ben under center, it's going to give them more red zone chances. And this offense could look different this year just because the defense, especially after they got Minkah Fitzpatrick last year, was just a whole other level. So they might not have to have Big Ben throw it over 600 times. They might be able to lean on James Conner even more. So, yeah, as long as James Conner is healthy, he's pushing RB1 value. So getting him as some sort of low-end RB2 with like David Johnson and Mostert guys, he's a steal right now, and I think his ADP is only going to go up.
And people are just going to keep looking at that crazy picture of him like working out with his shirt off, and everyone's going to be like, "Give me some man." That didn't look real. Anyway, Sean, you're up now for number 3.
So my number 3 is Robert Woods. His ADP is still wide receiver 26 for some reason. Admittedly, I kind of started with him outside the top 20 when I first did my projections, but he's one of those guys where the more you look into the data, the more you work on his projections, the more he moves up. So he's all the way up to wide receiver 17 for me now. And, a big part of that is that 7-week stretch to end last year where he was the wide receiver 7. A lot of the conditions that, helped allow that are going to be there to start the year. So that's when the Rams decided to run more 2 tight end sets. And actually, when they ran those sets, Cooper Kupp was off the field. So Woods had less competition for targets. And, they're planning to do that more in 2020 with Higbee and Gerald Everett. So we're going to see more of that this year. And Brandon Cooks is off the team, so that's less competition for targets. So Woods, all the metrics that led to his success at the end of last year are going to be there this year. And another sneaky thing with him is the only wide receiver with more rushing yards the past 2 seasons is Cordell Patterson. So, Woods he's good for a good jet sweep a game, and, he can get 10 yards on it or a touchdown every so often. So that's factored in the projections too. So when you add it all up, he has sneaky upside. I think people are not realizing that, and for some reason he's in the wide receiver 26 range in ADP, and I think that's only going to go up.
Tags, yeah or nay?
Yeah, no, 100%. I have Robert Woods at 18. We talked about him on the last show at Davis Maddock. He was talking about Woods as a potential wide receiver 1. I don't think I'm going to put him there. I think the touchdown upside is limited in terms of, like, he's never scored more than 6 touchdowns in a season. I don't anticipate Jared Goff just suddenly becoming that guy. But I think the reason that Robert Woods is falling to wide receiver 26, I obviously agree that his ADP should come up because he's a safe wide receiver too. But the question is, are people going to start people are looking for upside? Guys like A.J. Brown, guys like DK Metcalf, DJ Chark. Those are guys in that territory that people are expecting to take that next step, maybe like a Terry McLaurin. Sean, I'm gonna have you settle something right now between Dan and I. Is Robert Woods or A.J. Brown? If you're on the clock right now, and I know it's a difficult question because it really depends on your roster construction, but in a vacuum, which player do you take?
I would say A.J. Brown. I do love Robert Woods, but A.J. Brown is a whole other level. His efficiency stats are going to go down, like his touchdown rate and yards per catch, but they're still going to be very good. And we have to consider last year, he wasn't really a full-time player and or playing with Ryan Tannehill until week 6 or 7, I think it was. So I look at that data more closely, and yeah, he's going to have more volume this year, so it's going to help offset some of the regression in efficiency. So, I mean, Brown has a higher floor and ceiling than Woods, I think. So, yeah, I'm all in on Brown. If it's
Where do you have him
those
ranked
two.
right now?
I have Brown, the wide receiver 15 right now, but his upside's much higher. So he's one of those guys where I'm willing to draft him above even Allen Robinson or Juju Smith-Schuster if it's like a best ball. But I have him wide receiver 15, which is above ADP, I believe.
So Dan, I think he's right in between us. Like, you have him at wide receiver 10 or 12.
I moved him to 12. Tags and I had an email debate basically about him, which we published, and we both sort of made our points, and he made a lot of great points. Yeah, I had him at 10 originally. He's at 12, but I just want to make it clear, guys. Like, I mean, Robert Woods, 13th for me. So when you said who would you sort of prefer, it was like, well, frankly, it doesn't matter to me. It's basically the same thing for me. But
nice.
Yeah, I'm high on both guys. So all right, let's move on here. Tags, who's your number 3?
All right, number 3 is a guy that I don't think we've hit the storm, and I just grabbed him in the Scott Fishbowl because we haven't got there yet, and he keeps moving up my draft board. The more we hear about Alshon Jeffrey, the more that we hear about Deshaun Jackson, who might be cut. Carson Wentz has got to throw to somebody, and Jalen Reagor is a lightning bolt of a player. I liked him a lot going in before the NFL Combine. I had him as my number 2 receiver. I actually had him in front of CeeDee Lamb. I liked him an awful lot, and then the Combine happened, and people moved him down their boards because he ran a 4.4 instead of the 4.2 that some people thought he would, but he's a movable chess piece. He can stretch the field. His play speed is fantastic. Apparently, he's impressing Eagles coaches already, and knowing that Deshaun Jackson not only is older, he might get cut. There's some concerns there. Alshon Jeffrey, they're talking about him starting the season on the PUP list because there's no good news that can come out of there. So Jalen Reagor, coming off the board as wide receiver 56 right now, that's too low. I have him up to wide receiver 45 right now, and I could honestly, I see him getting higher as the offseason progresses.
How about you, Sean? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love it. The Eagles are always hard to project for me. So his median projections aren't very high in my model, but yeah, I love the upside, and he goes in the range where I think it's okay to reach and take guys with that upside. So yeah, I love the call.
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to be a guy who's going to move up as the draft season goes. Again, because you've got I don't expect Alshon Jeffrey to start the season. As the starter, I think he's not going to be able to overcome the injury. Who knows what's going on with Deshaun Jackson? I think in that way, Reagor's upside is going to be factored in by fantasy managers who are doing drafts. So I like that call too, Tex. All right, my number 3 is not quite as exciting. I'm going to go back to the wide receiver, though, here. It is rare that I get to talk about a Jets player that I expect to rise in the draft season. It's Jamison Crowder. He is 48th right now in ADP in half PPR. I'm 39th. Jamison Crowder was the 33rd wide receiver in half PPR formats last year, 31st if you want to take that all the way to week 17. I hosted a daily baseball show. A fantasy baseball show called Leading Off, and last year I compared Jeff Samardzija to a peanut butter sandwich. And what I meant by that was I ate a peanut butter sandwich for lunch every day for 10 years. That's not a joke. Did I ever finish that peanut butter sandwich and say, oh my God, that was the best lunch I ever had in my life? No, not once. But was I ever disappointed? No. I was just bored and glad I remembered to pack my lunch that day. There's no upside with Jamison Crowder, right? I mean, his average depth of target, his yards per target, they're all terrible. He's got 20 touchdowns in 5 seasons. But again, we've talked about this offseason. It's weird. We don't know if they're going to be preseason games. The other wide receivers on the Jets, Rashad Perriman, Denzel Mims, they're not going to be sort of have the chemistry with Sam Darnold or anything like that. And I think he's going to be a riser because I think eventually that piece of the puzzle is not really being factored in yet by fantasy managers. I don't think they're really taking into account how this truncated offseason, the possible lack of preseason games, is really going to be affecting. It's not always about upside. I get that we look at these wide receiver 4s, wide receiver 5s, and we're like, man, we want the home run play. You don't have to always try the weird wrap at the restaurant 30 minutes down the street. Sometimes you can make a peanut butter sandwich and win your fantasy title. So for me, Jamison Crowder is a guy who I think is undervalued now, and I think as the offseason goes on, he's going to be rising up draft boards.
I don't think he's actually going to rise up draft boards. Do I think he should? Yes, I do. I'm actually working on a piece right now. Did you know Jamison Crowder performed as a wide receiver 2 or better in 43.8% of his games in 2019, while Jarvis Landry hit that mark 31.3% of the time? We look at them as both boring options, but they get the job done. Crowder had a bit lower of a floor, but again, you're talking about Rashad Perriman coming over on a 1-year deal, doesn't have time to work with Sam Darnold. You have Denzel Mims, a rookie receiver, and on top of that, I've looked at strength of schedule differently for wide receivers, where I don't evaluate it on last year's stats. I look at actual cornerback units and I grade them 1 through 32, and then I put it in this schedule piece and I go through it, and it works for perimeter wide receivers because we know exactly who they're going to be lining up against. Where slot receivers, they're facing nickel cornerbacks and things like that, so strength of schedule doesn't matter nearly as much, and we know Sam Darnold has loved slot wide receivers since he became the starter there. I mean, so I actually am on board with you here. I just don't think Jamison Crowder goes up because people don't, and no offense, Dan, they don't want any part of the Jets. And Jamison Crowder is looked at as boring.
I don't understand that. I mean, this is going to be a dynamic offense. It's going to be one of the great seasons in NFL history. Sean, I mean, I think that's fair. And Sean, are you that? Like, maybe he's undervalued or maybe not, but in terms of rising up draft boards, probably not?
Yeah, well, I agree that he's undervalued. Again, predicting what the public will think, I think we're kind of in the dark on that. I think they should gravitate towards him. And I think you made a great point that, this offseason, there's going to be more uncertainty than ever. And in those situations, you actually should start to gravitate towards more reliable players like a Crowder. Again, Rashad Perriman's brought in to replace Robbie Anderson. He doesn't have any chemistry with Sam Darnold. They brought in Denzel Mims, who I think is extremely talented, but he has no chemistry. And again, he's one of the players, given the lack of offseason, won't have time to develop as much as I would have liked. So I mean, yeah, Darnold's going to lean on Crowder even more. So, if you're taking him as your first wide receiver on the bench just to give you a stable option on the floor, it gives you the ability to kind of take home run shots after that, like take a guy like Antonio Brown. So I think he does kind of give you the options to take chances elsewhere. So in that, he's more valuable than people think.
All right, so you've heard it here first. Jets are going to the Super Bowl. Everybody's in agreement, so we're all good on that. Nice, perfect. Okay, Sean, number 4, go ahead.
So this guy is sort of similar to Crowder, where nobody wants to draft him, and it shows with his ADP, and it's Marvin Jones. So he's being drafted as wide receiver 40. I get it. Guys like Marquise Brown, Will Fuller, even CeeDee Lamb are way more attractive options. But, when it comes to this offseason, I think a guy like him will benefit. He's had 4 years of chemistry with Matt Stafford. And last year he was the wide receiver 14, weeks 1 through 8 when Stafford was healthy. So we know he'll get it done. Yes, he's on the wrong side of a 30. But, if you get him as a late wide receiver 3, I mean, you could do worse. So he's a player that, I wasn't really targeting early in drafts, but just the more I look into data, the more he's falling in ADP, the more I love him, because it's almost like nobody else wants him, so I'm stuck with him, and I'm fine with that. He's kind of like the Jamison Crowder in my drafts, so it's one of those things where the drafts kind of lend him to me, but when you make projections, it's hard to pass him up when he falls outside of the top 40.
Yeah, I think I basically feel the way you guys do about Crowder with this. I have Jones at 33. So I'm definitely ahead of where he is at ADP, which is 40th. But at the same time, I don't know why anybody's going to change that. I mean, Marvin Jones is undervalued. He's like poster boy for undervalued. He's poster boy for like, hi, Kenny Golladay. You can also see Marvin Jones' production and pretty much get very similar numbers, but 25 picks later. So that's my only thing, is that I wonder whether or not the public's actually going to jump on this. What do you think, Tex?
Yeah, being he's so up there in age, I don't see it moving very much, but I'm with you guys. I don't know what the difference is between someone like him and Will Fuller. Both guys have struggled to stay healthy a little bit. Both get excellent targets in their offense. And they've produced similarly. Like Marvin Jones, I'm just looking at the numbers now. He's given you some upside. Like, he's given you some big weeks. It's seemingly like, 2 games every year roughly where it's around 25 plus PPR points. That's nice to have when you're plugging in. I view him as like a wide receiver 4, someone that's nice to have, that will probably give you wide receiver 3 numbers about half the time, but you're going to get a couple boom performances along the way too. So I do like him, but unfortunately, again, he's 31 years old. So he's someone that I don't think the public is going to change their mind on as the offseason progresses. I think they're going to look at players like Deontay Johnson instead, and like trying to guess guys that are going to break out, maybe like a CeeDee Lamb, or Mecole Hardman going as high as he is. He's even close to that territory, but I agree with you guys that he's a sturdy wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 fringe player for me.
All right, Tag. So give us a player who is going to be rising up draft boards then.
I want to know why Henry Ruggs is not moving up boards. I wasn't the biggest Ruggs guy pre-draft. I thought the Raiders were, I thought it was bad. I'm going to be clear about it. I thought it was a bad pick. However, he really does mesh well with Derek Carr and what Derek Carr does. Derek Carr's completion percentage was like 70% last year, and it's because his average depth of target is nothing. And Henry Ruggs is not necessarily a deep receiver, but he's a guy that you get the ball in his hands, you let him make some plays afterwards. They're going to give him some of those jet sweeps that we talked about with Robert Woods. Ruggs is in a situation where he doesn't have competition on for targets. They're going to use Darren Waller, of course, because that offense does use the tight end an awful lot. But Henry Ruggs was drafted at number 12 overall for a reason. It should have been Jerry Jeudy, but I said that enough. But Henry Ruggs at wide receiver 53, come on. I feel like he's that guy belongs in that Will Fuller territory where it's like if you want to draft him and plug him in as a wide receiver 3 and understand you might have a little bit of a rocky road along the way, but you're going to get some massive performances like a Tyreek Hill in a way, a Tyreek Hill light. I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill because he's not tied to Patrick Mahomes or Andy Reid, but again, he's a guy that can explode. One play can make his week. He could have 2 catches for 60-some yards and a touchdown. So Ruggs is a guy that I have pegged for at least 75 targets, and I'm really curious to hear Sean's take on him because in your tweet that you talked about celebrating, you talked about trying to figure out the target share for the Raiders wide receivers, but we have to lend some credence to the fact that he was drafted number 12 overall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I still think Darren Waller is going to be the number 1 target, but I have Ruggs closely behind him. I think that really the uncertainty is all the other pass catchers, but I agree that they drafted Ruggs early because they intend to use him heavily in his rookie season. So I think he does have a higher floor and ceiling than people realize. So I'm with you. I don't really get why his ADP is as low as it is, especially, when I talk about boring guys like Marvin Jones. Ruggs is an exciting player, so it really doesn't make sense. So he's a guy that I could see his ADP going up for sure.
See, I think, I think that we would see the ADP rise if there was a preseason. And I think if people saw how fast he is and what he can do after the catch. Without that, I don't know, man. I think people might start gravitating, and maybe not because this is sort of, it's a lack of exciting options. But I do kind of think that people may sort of get off like the exciting options because I can't see them. They can't watch them actually play in person. And they might be a little worried and go back to more boring options like my next guy, who is James White. He is a boring option. He's RB38 tags. I know you don't like him, so we'll get into that in a second. I have him 32nd in half PPR league, so I'm above ADP. He's got a pretty high floor. He rarely kind of gives you a dud, and I get it's a different offense, but he's averaged 80 receptions, nearly 700 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. And yes, obviously, there is no Tom Brady there anymore. They're not going to throw the ball as much. They're probably going to run it a lot more. They're going to rely on their defense. But look, Cam Newton's here now. And, I get it. You don't think of him as somebody who's like, oh, this is a guy who's going to target your running backs. But James White is not Christian McCaffrey. But, 113 targets in 2017 for McCaffrey, 124 targets in 2018 when Cam was there. So, look, to me, a guy like James White who does give you that really high floor, he was 21st in half PPR formats. He was 8th last year, 21st 2 years ago. I feel like eventually the entire, 2 things. One, I think that it's Cam coming in and people are going to start sort of liking Patriots players more, even if they can't articulate why. They're just going to be like, oh, Cam, everybody sort of goes up. But 2, again, I think that in the end, guys going around him fantasy managers are going to look at it and basically just be like, I don't really like any of these guys. At least James White is going to give me the floor. So I'm going to take him sort of, akin to Tarik Cohen. But Tags, I know you don't like him, so I'll give you first crack on hitting that.
It's just the offense, like losing a lot of that passing volume. This team's going to throw the ball 100 times less. That's going to happen. So you have to break it out and say, okay, if we expect N'Keal Harry to have a bigger role in the offense, this team, it wasn't, nobody gave the Patriots enough crap for trading a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu. That was a terrible trade. And a guy that's still on the roster and he's going to get targets. Julian Edelman has a ton of volume in that offense. So if we're starting to cut back, targets, everybody's going to lose a piece of that pie. But there are some guys that have to take a step forward. Damian Harris is a guy that I anticipate getting more of a role in the offense this year. Their former third-round pick, Sony Michel, having another surgery. There's just so much that's going into this that James White was always someone I loved as a value in drafts. He was basically my Tarik Cohen on a better offense. I was willing to draft him as the RB30 with Tom Brady under center, and I'd get him there every single time because people continually undervalued his importance in that offense. But Tom Brady isn't Cam Newton, or Cam Newton's not Tom Brady in terms of what they bring to the offense. And Cam Newton will be the starter. He's not a guy that throws a swing pass extremely well. Cam Newton's just not an accurate quarterback. And he's not a guy that's going to check down. He wants to keep his eyes down the field. He wants to move in the pocket, whereas Tom Brady feels an ounce of pressure, he's dumping the ball off. So I don't like James White, and he's probably going, to your credit, he's probably going to finish as probably a top 36 back. I mean, I guess, but it's right around there. But the ceiling for him with Cam Newton under center, I think, is maybe like RB25, maybe. And if you're in that range, I would rather grab someone with some upside, like a Latavius Murray. I would rather have him, who's going to have a role even with Kamara healthy. But if Kamara were to go down, you have an RB1. There's nothing that makes James White an RB1.
Sean, break the tie.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sucks because I kind of agree with both of you. I think it depends on how your draft is going. Whether you should take James White or not. I've been in a couple drafts where I ended up taking him. And it's, you punt at running back early on and you kind of just need a high floor running back like White just to fill the gap in the meantime. And then I also load up on guys like Tags just mentioned, like Latavius Murray or Alexander Mattison, potential starting running backs. So it depends. I wouldn't go out of your way to kind of take James White and think you just won your championship or anything, but I think he does provide value in that you're going to get 6 to 7 points in standard or 10 to 12 in PPR. He's one of those guys where he's going to get you consistent production, but never have like spiked weeks. So it depends on your draft. If you punt on running back early on, he kind of makes kind of an interesting safety net for you later on.
Can you imagine how boring my teams are going to be this year? I'm going to be like,
Crowder,
what's up, guys?
Jameson
Crowder, James White, best teams ever. All right, Sean,
there's a place for value, though. I mean, you need some of those guys in your team.
That's what I'm saying. And I think this year more than ever, that's sort of why these guys are rising. They're like, oh, God, who cares about this? I think this year more than ever, as we get into the draft season, as people realize, like, holy cow, we don't know what this is going to look like. All these young guys are going to be like, all right, give me a little boring stuff, a little bit. Okay, I know I've got this in the back. And I think that's going to make a difference. But that's just for me in the way I'm drafting, the way I'm looking at it. Sean, last guy, who do you have?
So this guy might be obvious and cheap on my part, but I have David Njoku. Now, I know if he does end up getting traded to a tight end needy team, I mean, his ADP is going to spike. So I'm more talking about the period of now until an announcement like that may happen. And the more I think about it, his floor is staying on the Browns, which I don't think is even that bad of a floor. With Kevin Stefanski coming in, they're going to be running more 2 tight end sets anyway. So, I mean, he could have a role even with Austin Hooper on the team. So he could surprise even if he stays there. But in the meantime, if he falls outside of the top 20, I'm willing to gamble that he does end up on a New England or even Green Bay, where I'd probably have him ranked probably no higher than tight end 15, but somewhere in the tight end 17 range. He'd land in that massive tight end 2 tier that I just love attacking. So he's a guy where you're kind of getting that upside for free. I've been in some drafts recently where he's going as far as, tight end 25 or 26 if I don't get him. And that's just foolish, just based on the reports that he's requesting a trade. Whereas even if he doesn't get traded, I think he has a pretty high floor on the Browns. So I think right now he's a guy that his ADP should be rising just based on the potential of him landing on a team like New England or Green Bay.
Yeah, he's going anywhere between 28 and 31 right now in a lot of ADPs.
Yeah.
So, Tags, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like David Njoku, and I feel like he's had a bad break. And like when the team drafted Harrison Bryant, I think it was the third or the fourth round they drafted him. I was like, what is this team doing? And then all of a sudden we hear they're picking up his rookie contract, the rookie option. And I'm like, okay, clearly they went around a lot of 2 tight end sets, and it's going back to Minnesota last year. And I don't think a lot of people realize Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith were basically the same player. It's just Kyle Rudolph scored a couple more touchdowns. Even the red zone targets were similar between those two. So for people drafting Austin Hooper as the 10th tight end off the board, which is where his current ADP is, it should be a lot closer between Austin Hooper and David Njoku, but I don't think the public is going to realize that unless, of course, as we talk about, Njoku gets traded. But it's just a sad situation, man. I think Austin Hooper is a product of volume, and it's not that he's a bad football player. I just don't think that he's a top 12 tight end in terms of actual talent. And David Njoku is still young. I want to say he's just 24 years old, and tight ends just don't perform. I think we forget with tight ends that they're not supposed to perform over their first couple of seasons. You know what I mean? Going back to, I think, 2008, the only tight ends that have finished in their first couple seasons, like their first season, I should say, rookie season, was Rob Gronkowski. Finished. He was a tight end one, I think, his rookie season, and then you had Evan Engram. That's it. And basically everybody else is expecting these guys to get better, and it just doesn't happen. Even Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, these guys weren't. TJ Hawkinson, they weren't good in their rookie years. We haven't even seen Njoku on the field. Njoku is like a guy that's dealt with some injuries, and he was considered a very, very raw prospect that had extreme upside. If Miami Dolphins had him instead of Mike Gesicki, I have no doubt in my mind that David Njoku would be putting up better numbers than Gesicki.
Well, this seems to be the offseason of agents demanding trades for their clients with Njoku and Mostert, so I'm sure we'll get a few more of those tags. Who's your last player?
Last one is a guy that's finished as a wide receiver, a top 24 wide receiver in each of the last two seasons, and now he's getting a major upgrade at quarterback. And I don't know why people are hating on this guy. He's going as the wide receiver 33 right now. I'm talking about Tyler Boyd. His role isn't changing. Obviously, you have A.J. Green set to come back to the offense, but drafters are not really putting much into that because A.J. Green is going as the 28th wide receiver. So it's not like people are like, oh, A.J. Green's going to steal all those targets. He's not. John Ross is probably going to start over T. Higgins, and John Ross is going outside the top 70 wide receivers. But Tyler Boyd is the wide receiver 33. I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice because if you don't like A.J. Green and you think he's going to get hurt and you think he's on the way down, Tyler Boyd's the number one option here. And it's like going to LSU with Joe Burrow. You look at Justin Jefferson. That's the guy that was playing in the slot for him. He was their best receiver in terms of production-wise. So going to a big slot receiver like Tyler Boyd, Joe Burrow is going to absolutely love Tyler Boyd. And Tyler Boyd's going to love having a quarterback like Joe Burrow there. So for the life of me, I can't figure out why people are fading someone like Tyler Boyd.
Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I love the call. I mean, he's almost a better version of Marvin Jones than Jamison Crowder. Yep. So, yeah, I love it. And, the real competition in this offense would be, T. Higgins, John Ross, and even Auden Tate, how that's going to work out. But we know that Tyler Boyd's going to be a full-time player. And the passing offense should be way better this year. They're going to be in just as many pass-heavy game scripts. So I love the call. And their tight end situation is so bad that even that could boost Tyler Boyd as well. And we've seen that he plays better when A.J. Green's on the field as well. So I love the call. And he's a player that I could definitely see his ADP rising.
All right, well, Sean, you mentioned that the Bengals tight end situation is bad, but there is a tight end situation that is good, and that is Atlanta's, where Hayden Hurst plays, and he is currently going as the 13th tight end, and I think that's going to rise. I have him 10th. I think he's going to get to around there by the time draft season really gets going. Look, he's talented. He was 6th in yards per target last year. He's PFF's 8th highest graded tight end last year. He rarely has played even half the snaps. Now he's going into a pass-heavy offense. Under Dirk Cutter, the Falcons target the tight end. Austin Hooper had 60 targets through 8 games before his injury last year, 52 catches for 591 yards. You want to go back to Cutter's first stint in it. There was Tony Gonzalez. He saw 118 targets per season, and he's probably going to run out of the slot, right? Hooper was one of the most targeted tight ends out of the slot. The Falcons still don't really have the slot receiver, Russell Gage, whatever. Mm-hmm. So for me, I feel like, when I look at it, I look at guys like Austin Hooper tags, everything you kind of just said about him going to Cleveland, and I look at Noah Fant and the upside of Hurst, and what should be a pretty high floor just screams to me. And I think as the offseason goes on, that fantasy managers are going to realize the same thing.
I think top 10 is his floor. I really do. And I'm saying that, and I understand it's his first year with the offense, but when you look at the team, they never replaced Mohamed Sanu. Russell Gage is not it. They traded a second-round pick. They didn't even try and bargain with Austin Hooper, saying, hey, take a team-friendly contract. We'll work it out. We'll have some players move some money around. They didn't even make him an offer. They didn't care. And then they go ahead and trade a second-round pick for Hayden Hurst, which shows you how they value him. And don't think that Hayden Hurst sucks just because he was playing behind Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews happens to be pretty damn good. And that's why he's being drafted as the number 3 tight end in fantasy leagues this year. But yeah, I'm with you on this 100%. I think it's possible that we see Hayden Hurst as a top 6 tight end, but I do think top 10, top 12 is his floor. So going as tight end 13, honestly, I hope his price stays where it is, but the more we talk about him, I know I've talked about him quite a bit, but the more we talk about him, the more he's going to move up. He was a guy that was going outside the top 15 a couple weeks ago, so his price is moving up, and it should continue to do so.
What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I love the call. Austin Hooper was my highest owned tight end in best ball last year, and it was for a lot of the same reasons you pointed out. Dirk Cutter has a history of just, being a great tight end coach, like looking back at Tony Gonzalez or even Tampa Bay, and then when he leaves, it kind of falls apart. So that's why I'm low on Austin Hooper this year and high on Hurst. Agree that I think his ADP can't go up more. I'm actually disappointed that the public has him already, as a borderline tight end 1 because I can't get him in many drafts. So I'm not sure how much upward trajectory he can have, but certainly the more you look into it, the more you know that Hurst could have a breakout year. And he's probably more talented than Austin Hooper. So I consider him, a better version of Austin Hooper in this offense.
Yes, thank you. Sean, if Yates, if you're listening, boom.
Yeah, well, Tags, you and I can just keep talking about him and get that ADP all the way up. Not in drafts that we're in. All right, guys, so those were our 15 players. We are going to finish up with something that's called Fantasy Odd Man Out. I will try to explain it best I can. It's a lightning round. It's 16 questions, 4 for each of the main positions in fantasy. It's going to kind of go like this. All right, guys, we've got 3 analysts, Sean Koerner, Dan Harris, Mike Teglier. Which analyst was not able to drink his coffee without spilling it all over his pants today? Tags, who's the answer? Dan, obviously. So then I would be, if you get that right, great, you get certain points. Then the next question, we would remove Dan from the equation. The next question would just be Tags and Sean. That's basically what it's going to be going. I will alternate. The first question of each one is going to be worth more, and it's going to get progressively left because the first question you're going to have 5 choices, and we eliminate 1 each time. You will see as we get going. I've already made it too complicated, so I'm going to start with Sean. You guys will get it. I 100% promise. And Sean put the odds of Tags winning at minus 200 because Tags wins everything. So we're going to see how that goes. All right? So here we go. We're going to start with quarterbacks. This question is for Sean. There's no stealing or anything like that.
Okay.
All right, Sean. Which player that I'm going to list did not finish with at least 350 pass completions? So which of these 5 quarterbacks finished with fewer than 350 pass completions? Is it Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, or Kyler Murray?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm going to go
These are all tough.
I'm going to go with Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murray is correct. He had 349. All right, the first question is worth 4 points, so he's out to a big one. This one's worth 3 points, Tags, to get 1 fewer. Which player... God, I hate the way... You know who makes these questions, Tags. I'm teasing him. The way he words these. Which player was not sacked fewer than 30 times? So which one of these players was sacked more than 30 times, okay? Again, Murray is gone, so it's the remaining 4 is Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, or Derek Carr.
Which one was sacked fewer than 30 times?
More than 30 times.
Oh, more than 30
Only
times.
one of them was sacked more than 30 times.
It was Matt Ryan, right?
Matt Ryan is correct 48 times, by the way. That is crazy. Correct. That's 3 points for you. All right, going forward. Sean, which player did not finish with a touchdown rate above 4%? So which one did not finish above 4% for a touchdown rate? Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Derek Carr.
Derek Carr.
No, that is incorrect. It was Derek Carr was 4.1. It was actually Jared Goff at 3.5%. All right, Tags, last one. Only 2 left now because Jared Goff's off the board. Which player did not post a quarterback rating above 100? Is it Dak Prescott or Derek Carr?
Derek Carr's numbers were deceivingly good in terms of like when you go to that because he didn't turn the ball over much. His yards per attempt was high. I think this is a trick question. I'm gonna say that Dak Prescott was not over 100.
That is correct. It was Dak Prescott, 99.7. Derek Carr, 100.8. So, out of curiosity, Derek Carr had more than 350 pass completions, was sacked fewer than 30 times, finished with a touchdown rate above 4%, and posted a QB rating of above 100. Does anybody want to change their mind on Derek Carr whatsoever?
You know what's crazy? He threw for like over 4,000 yards last year, and like people like talk about how bad he was. And like Aaron Rodgers, I just saw it the other day. Aaron Rodgers' prop for 2020 in passing yards is 38.99.
Yep.
I was like, that's a gimme.
Yeah.
Come on.
All right, so for that first round, 4-4, because Sean, you got the 4-point question right, and Tags, you got the 3 and the 1-point question right. Very good. We're moving on to running backs. Tags, you're going to get the first shot at this because this is worth 4, so you get the big one. Yes. Okay, which of these players, all right, again, they're all like triple negatives or whatever. Which of these players did not post a catch rate above 75%? Okay, so which one was lower, catch rate lower than 75%?
Okay.
Is it Austin Eckler, Le'Veon Bell, Kenyon Drake, Leonard Fournette, or Miles Sanders? Less than 75% catch rate.
Oh, wait, so it was Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette, Le'Veon Bell.
Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake.
Oh man, this is tough.
That's right.
I'm trying to go back to the Miami time with Drake. I'm gonna say Kenyon Drake.
Kenyon Drake is correct.
Yep.
Tagged. Man, no wonder you never lose these games. 73.5%. Excellent work. 4 points.
I debated Le'Veon, but I was like, no.
We all know Le'Veon
yeah,
Bell's
it
the
was
best player ever. Okay. All right, Sean, this is for you. Okay, so Kenyon Drake's off the board now. Which player did not average more than 5.5 yards per target? So which one of these players had less than 5.5 yards per target? Austin Eckler, Le'Veon Bell, Leonard Fournette, or Miles Sanders?
Now I'm going to go with Le'Veon Bell.
No, not Le'Veon Bell.
I know this one.
Go ahead.
Because it was Leonard Fournette.
Correct. You don't get any points for that, but it is Leonard Fournette.
He was so bad.
He was 5.2 yards per target. Bell got 5.9, so crushed that 5.5 number. All right, Tags, back to you now for the next one. Which player did not record 700-plus total yards from Week 9 on? So which player was under 700 total yards from Week 9 on in the season, okay? Austin Eckler, Le'Veon Bell, Miles Sanders.
Oh, I'm thinking about Melvin Gordon coming back, and it lowered Eckler's ceiling. He scored a lot of touchdowns. I'm going to say, I think it's got to be Eckler.
The answer is Le'Veon Bell, 637 yards. Eckler just snuck by at 703. But, yeah. All right, last one. This one is worth 1 point. For Sean, which player did not have a long run of at least 60-plus yards? Is it Eckler or is it Miles Sanders?
I'll go with that's a tough one.
Might be a trick question.
Yeah, it might be a trick one. I'll go with Eckler.
Eckler is correct. His longest run was 35 yards. Miles Sanders' longest run was 65 yards. So among those players, Miles Sanders posted a catch rate above 75%. He averaged more than 5.5 yards per target. He recorded 700-plus total yards from Week 9 on, and he had a long run of at least 60 yards. Anybody changing their opinion on Miles Sanders?
I mean, he's a good football player. It just comes down to Doug Peterson.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe we'll call Doug Peterson, and then maybe he'll change his opinion on Miles Sanders, give him more work. All right, going into round 3, Tags is up 8-5. All right, Sean, you got a big one here, okay? This is the first question, so it's worth 4 points. You can take back the lead. Wide receivers. Which player did not average more than 8 yards per target? So which of these players averaged fewer than 8 yards per target? Is it Tyler Boyd, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, or Michael Gallup?
Wait, who was the first guy again?
Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, I'll go with Boyd.
Tyler Boyd is correct.
Nice.
Big time. Nice job. 7.1 yards per target. All right, pressure's back on, Tags.
Yep.
Sean is in the lead, 9-8. Next one. Which player did not post a catch rate higher than 60%? Or in English, which one had a catch rate lower than 60%? Is it Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, or Michael Gallup?
It's got to be. I'm trying to think of the high yards per reception. I think this has got to be Michael Gallup.
Michael Gallup is correct.
Yep.
Very good. Tags 58.4%.
He averaged like 19 yards per reception, didn't he?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well done, Tags. Oh, man, you guys are crushing it. All right, here we go, Sean. For 2 points, which player did not post an average depth of target over 11.5 yards? So which player was under 11.5 yards average depth of target? Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett.
DJ Moore.
DJ Moore is correct. 11.1. That's 2. We have a tie game. Tags, you can take a 1-point lead if you get this one right. Oh. Which player did not have a target share of over 20%? Is it Amari Cooper or Tyler Lockett? So which one did not have over 20%?
Which one didn't get over? I know Cooper's target I'm trying to think of how many pass attempts Dak Prescott had right now, because Cooper, I think, ended up like 118 targets, so it wasn't like a whole lot. I'm going to say Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper is correct. He's actually exactly 20%. Tyler Lockett is 21%. That is the correct answer. Tags is ahead 12-11. So just to recap, Tyler Lockett averaged more than 8 yards per target, posted a catch rate higher than 60%, posted an A-dot over 11.5, and had a target share of over 20%. How are you feeling about Tyler Lockett coming into the year?
I love Tyler Lockett. Bobby and I are arguing about him through email right now, because I had him as wide receiver 15, I think, and he had him at like wide receiver 28.
He's like quietly having a couple of like the most efficient years ever for a wide receiver.
He
just like
for
sort of
sure.
under the radar.
Yeah.
But I'm anticipating a surge in pass attempts for the Seahawks. And on top of that, you go back to Doug Baldwin. I mean, this role that those two have played, it's similar in terms of playing those slot snaps. And Russell Wilson's always extremely efficient, and it's just been ongoing. It's been a high touchdown rate for Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett. So I just don't see any reason that it just drops off completely. A little regression, sure, but
yeah. All right, final group, tight ends. I have Tags ahead 12-11, so I'm pretty sure if Tags gets this one right, and he's up, he wins the game, of course.
No pressure.
No pressure, Tags. It's tight ends. Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, which player did not have a catch rate over 66%? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Higbee, Austin Hooper, Jared Cook, Mark Andrews, Hunter Henry.
This one's Mark Andrews, isn't it?
Mark Andrews is correct.
Whoa.
65.3%. God, Tags are
I thought it was like I thought he was like 62 or 63%.
No, he was just under. Jared Cook barely squeaked by over 66.2, but we're going to finish it up. But, man, Tags, you're annoying in so many ways. You just constantly win these games. It's ridiculous. I don't understand. All right. Anyway, Sean, let's make this as competitive as we can.
I'll try. I should have said a spread, huh?
Yeah, you definitely should have said a spread. Which player did not average at least 8.2 yards per target? Okay? Is it Tyler Higbee, Austin Hooper, Jared Cook, or Hunter Henry? Under 8.2 yards per target.
That's a tough one. I'll go with Hunter Henry.
No, Hunter Henry was 8.6. The correct answer was Austin Hooper. 8.
I would have been with you. I would have said Hunter Henry.
Yeah,
Hooper was my next guess, but
yeah. There are no points for next guesses, Sean,
exactly.
so you'll have to rely on the fact that you were the most accurate draft record. I could sell yourself. All right. Tags number 3. Which player did not have more than 250 yards after the catch on the season? Is it Tyler Higbee, Jared Cook, or Hunter Henry? So fewer than 250 yards after the catch.
Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry is correct. 164 yards after the catch. Jared Cook was close, but he barely squeaked by. All right, last one. Sean, which player did not have more than 10 targets inside the 20-yard line? Is it Tyler Higbee or Jared Cook?
Jared Cook.
That is correct. Jared Cook had 9. Tyler Higbee, 19.
Wow.
So, yeah, Tyler Higbee, man, I mean, he had a catch rate over 66%. He averaged at least more than 8.2, well, exactly 8.2 yards per target, more than 250 yards after the catch, and more than 10 targets inside the 20. Out of curiosity, where is Higbee in your rankings, guys? Do you have that off the top of your head?
Higbee, I think right after Austin Hooper. I just feel like or not Austin Hooper, after Hayden Hurst at number 8. I have him as tight end 8, and I I feel like this is one of the toughest guys to project, and so I'm really curious where you guys have him, because you guys are the projection guys, and I think it's really difficult because it doesn't make much sense to keep Cooper Kupp off the field, because that's when Jared Goff succeeds the most. Obviously, Higbee showed up in a big way over the last 5 or 6 weeks, but a lot of that also came down to the fact that Gerald Everett was hurt. They drafted another tight end, Bryson Hopkins, so this is a team that's moving more towards that heavy tight end rotation, like the 2 tight end sets. But Sean, where do you have him? And make sense of this, please, because I don't know how to value Tyler Higbee. I think he's fine in the later rounds because you're not taking much risk. But if he moves up and let's say he's going around the 6th, 7th round, is he worth it at that point?
I mean, I have him as the tight end 7. If he picks up where he left off last year, that's a steal. But I agree that Gerald Everett, I think he's going to have a more prominent role, which is going to hurt him. I typically avoid these middling tight end 1 guys. That's when I'm loading up at wide receiver. And I just love the tight end 2 tier. So guys like Hurst, Gronk, Gesicki, Goddard, even Hooper if you want to throw him in there, Hawkinson, Fant, those guys, I tend to gravitate towards those and take them later, because if you think about league-winning plays the past couple years, George Kittle in 2018, last year you were able to get Austin Hooper and even Mark Andrews late. Darren Waller was undrafted in most leagues, so I think the value this year is kind of weight at tight end. So I've been kind of avoiding these Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee, Hunter Henry guys. I think they're just going too early.
Yeah, I'm 8th right now, but he's not a guy who I've drafted anywhere, and I don't really have interest in doing that. And not we're talking about it right now, and I'm like, man, push comes to shove, I feel like I just want Hayden Hurst. That's my guy. That's the guy who I want to get, right, when it comes down to it. But all right, anyway, guys, this was a lot of fun. Sean, congratulations again. Most accurate NFL fantasy football draft rankings of 2019. Congratulations. Thanks again for stopping by. As always, it's great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate coming on. Always happy to join you guys.
Remember, you can find Sean over at the Action Network, and he's on Twitter at @the_Ozmaker. Don't forget to check out our Game Changers podcast. You can listen to the episode with Sean while you're on there checking it out. We've got one coming out with Joe Dolan today. Probably will be out by the time you listen to this. Just search for Game Changers on your favorite podcast platform or go to fantasypros.com/podcast. Also, don't forget, we are giving away a signed DeAndre Hopkins helmet. The deadline to enter is July 15th at 11:59 p.m. Just leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Send a screenshot of it to contest@fantasypros.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. We are going to be back next week with 3 new episodes. Tune in then.
Thanks for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.